We are back with Creativity is the Cure. I am your host, Malcolm Moore, and today I have my son, Caleb Moore. How you doing, Caleb?
I'm good. How are you?
Can you tell everybody what you do for a living first?
I am an Unreal artist and team lead. I specialize in 3D art.
Where do you work and what type of work do you do?
I work for a sports media company called Brinks.tv, and I lead a team of 3D artists in creating virtual backgrounds and motion graphics and all kinds of nutty stuff with it.
Can you give us an example of something that you might do? Like what would be a situation where you employ those gifts and talents?
Our most recent big project was for the Women's Featherweight World Championship in boxing, and we created an entire virtual background for the fight and audience, and it was on a physical giant LED screen, so it felt like you were actually there. So we made all the backgrounds in this world that the fight would live in, I guess.
That's really cool. What about your musicianship? I know that you're a composer and a singer. Tell us a little bit about what you like to do with music and what you use to make your music.
Well, I definitely like making music because I am your son. And I think I have liked music for a long time, and I think it became important to me over the last 4 or 5 years to make my own, especially as I went to college and found a job in visual art. I needed a different form of art and creativity that was not related to my job. Right. So that I could get shit out.
What do you use to make your music? Like, do you use acoustic instruments? Do you use computers? What are you really comfortable composing with?
I am definitely more comfortable with computers because I don't think I am classically trained or talented in most instruments. And so I think having the time to just put together what I want to hear in my head on a computer instead of trying to figure it out with my hands is a lot easier.
I remember you being in choir in school, and I know you're a good singer. What comes first, though, the melodies, the words, or the music?
Any of the above, I guess. I feel like a lot of it just comes from throughout my day as my head does its thing spinning. I just have my notes app open like on a different window on my phone all the time where I'm just writing shit down all day that sounds cool to me or that strikes some melody to me and recording it into my phone as well as like a voice note. And that's a lot of it. But also a lot of it is just like I'll wake up or I'll be going through work with like a melody in my head and I need to get it down. And at some point the rest will come.
Let's go back to when you're younger. What is your first memory of being creative? It doesn't have to be the things that you do now. What was the first time that you're like, wow, what is this part of my brain? I'm just making something up.
Well, outside of drawing things in Sharpie and crayon on your walls and doors, I would have to say Mama, my grandmother, definitely did a lot in providing me with art. And when I would go to visit her, you would drop me off. She would leave me with just like a pen and paper and crayons and markers and all that and take me to like art classes and galleries. And I think that was early on a big thing for me. You guys got me like the easel and all these tools, and I was doing a lot of art at home that wasn't good because I was 5 years old, but it did a lot for me.
I think it was good. It looks like a latter-day Picasso type of thing. Yes, and it is true, ladies and gentlemen. He did get a Sharpie when we weren't looking and covered a whole white door in the living room.
And I'm sure I had my reasons. I'm sure it looked better in my brain then. But I think you and Mom and Mom and the people around me providing a lot of art tools opened up something that hasn't stopped for the rest of my life.
So was there a point where you were taking in all this artwork, things in your environment and museums that you finally decided I want to try this myself? Or was it all one type of thing?
I don't know if it was a conscious, I want to do this myself. I think it's just that you are an artist and Mom is an artist and Mom is an artist and everyone around me is. So it was a natural thing you guys exposed me to as a way to just express myself. And then I kept doing it.
What kind of creativity do you think that you inherited? Who do you think you got what from?
I mean, the music stuff has definitely made me from you. I wouldn't say Mom didn't contribute anything because she has her own very strong musical talents and tastes. But I think you are a lot more the dad who had instruments in the other room and was constantly playing stuff and encouraging instrument learning and stuff. So definitely a lot of that from you and your tastes, because I think your tastes in general still remain at the top of what I listen to and what inspires me, along with very different stuff that you wouldn't listen to. I think a lot of that, and I think from both of you, the art, because I feel like since I was a kid, both of you were always doodling and you're drawing things on my lunch bag and Mom is making disturbing things. And I think you guys both have your own wacky art taste that influenced me a lot and made me feel comfortable making weird stuff. I think also, especially mom gave me creativity and problem solving, which is a bit different from like artistic creativity, but she is a very creative problem solver, and watching that for my entire life has informed a lot of problem solving for me.
Can you explain that? Like, give me an example, because I think you're right. And that's really what we're here to talk about. What's a creative way that she taught you to solve a particular problem?
Well, I think as I've gone from being a child that just looks to her to solve everything to having to solve my own problems, I can look back a lot in moments where there is financial or emotional or whatever kind of life stress. And yeah, we all freak out, but she's always got a solution, and it's not the end of the world, and we're going to get through it. Especially if it means that she's helping like one of us, like her kids. She's very creative with just, we got to get through this. And I think she always finds a way to make something work, no matter how stressful it is. And I think that that has helped me a lot in just terms of not shutting down and needing to sit there and go, okay, yeah, this sucks, but there is a way, and it might be hard or it might be weird, but we're going to figure it out.
Sounds like a creative survival mechanism thing that she gave you, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
And just so you know, before
really
you were born, your mom had a 12-string acoustic guitar, and she was actually really good at playing. She doesn't.
Well, she doesn't show me that.
Just like with her drawing that she doesn't do anymore. She used to design clothes by drawing, and was pretty good on 12-string guitar, and used to play songs like by the Smiths and stuff like that.
I wish I'd seen that.
I'll have to dig through the videos. Here's a really important question. Do you think creativity can be used to help depression and anxiety? You and I were just talking about Charlie XCX a little bit, so I'm going to throw you a bone there.
Yeah, I think that's one of the main reasons why people make art, right? I mean, a lot of art is celebrating happy things, but I think the greater majority in a positive way of art is expressing anxiety and depression and things that might be hard to explain to other people or hard to keep repeating to other people, or maybe you feel insane for how strongly you feel it, so it feels a lot more intuitive to express it through music or visual media. I think it's a really good way to get that out of your body and to be heard, or even just have it for yourself to get it out. Like when you write a letter that you're not supposed to send, I feel like the art is very similar.
I mean, like one of those things where you're angry, you write a letter, and then you set it on fire.
Yeah. Yeah. Like when you're just like completely irrational and you shouldn't say these things or you shouldn't do them. So you write a letter or some long thing in your notes and you delete it or you throw it out. I think the art is very similar, but then other people also get to appreciate it.
Yeah. I was just listening to an interview today, and one of my favorite musicians, Brian Eno, said that with art, you can crash the plane and walk away. What do you think about that?
That's awesome. Yeah. I think that I've explained this to my therapist countless times that like my music in particular, I'm sure that a lot of people do this, but I don't sit down and make music because I'm in the most happy, elated mood of my life. I sit down because I want to scream that someone should die or that some horrible thing should happen or that like everything is worthless and I hate everyone. And you know,
what do you mean that's not happy?
Well, you know, those are like momentary things that you need to get out that like linger in your brain that maybe might not relate to your real emotions, but when you do it in a song, it fits because songs can be dramatic, and then it's out, and maybe someone finds it cool because it fits in music. But I couldn't like come to my friend and say that.
Yeah, no, I think that art is a very safe medium to let your stuff out. Like I was saying earlier, it's kind of like a musical exorcism.
Yes.
And I know that you haven't done a lot of performing live, but we were just watching Charlie XCX, and you were saying how it probably helps for her to get her emotions out into music, and not only herself, but you were saying like the crowd singing along. It must be a powerful therapeutic.
Yeah, I have no idea the mental fortitude and therapy it takes to walk away from that and not feel like the main character. And I'm sure it's really therapeutic to feel like that for a minute. And just like you've poured your heart out into this insane emotion that controls a tiny part of your brain, and then other people responded and heard it, and you can all scream about it together, and that's its own kind of therapy, I guess.
Yeah, that's got to be a really good thing. I can't imagine on that level. So we were just talking about her. What's another musical artist who inspires you, especially creative? Who do you listen to that you're like, oh my God, where did that come from?
Anything from Daft Punk. Yeah.
How is their music creative to you? For people that don't know, this is an electronica DJ duo from France, right?
Yep. Well, I think that they're form of it is just so different to me, because I think a lot of the music that I really like and get into is singer-songwriters who are sharing a piece of themselves, and they have this big persona and they're telling a story, and you get super invested in the character of them, and it's like a whole parasocial thing, and that's like cool. But with Daft Punk, it's these two faceless dudes who don't really have a story about themselves to tell, and they instead wanted to put on these masks as robots to express humanity and to explore through mostly like instrumental or very light lyrics, that kind of music, like the different ways that you can feel, you know, some classic French dancey, just sing your heart out stuff, but also some really deep cuts that feel really personal, and all of it with very minimal like human involved. It's just very much the expression of what can music put you through just by itself. And I think that's really cool. And I think that they're very unique with their production and the ways that they do that, because they're not selling themselves and they're not really telling a story of anyone. They're just kind of expressing a lot.
And I would take a guess that a lot of the people that you played me recently, they must have, if not consciously, subconsciously been influenced by them, because all the stuff they were doing, the mechanical beats and the vocoder and all that stuff, we're hearing even more of that in pop music today.
Yeah, I think it just goes to show how influential that whole era of like the height of French dance music was, because I think a lot of it has wormed its way into the rest of the industry in completely unrelated genres. And I think they were the face of that in some ways, but there was a lot of other people doing it too.
In quite a few of my interviews with other people, I brought up the fact that I love how David Bowie once, he was doing an interview and someone said, well, what is this song about? And he goes, I'm more interested in what you have to say than telling you why I wrote it.
Yeah.
He likes to hear people's interpretations. Now, the reason why I bring that up is it sounds like you're saying there's some inherent truth about Daft Punk, that they're faceless and robotic. That do you think that helps people project their own feelings onto the faceless identity of those two guys?
Yeah, I think you can insert yourself or a lot of just emotion in general into their stuff, and it's not tied to anyone. It's just like, I think the community, especially around them, shows it really well, because it's just a very positive, very happy, very excited community without much drama or like discussion around that. It's just, man, this is awesome, and I love listening to music together, and I think everyone gets to insert themselves in each other, and it's good.
True escapism.
Yes.
Now, what we didn't bring up is you went to college at a really cool school here in LA called Gnomon, and you went mainly, I know that they do two things, correct me if I'm wrong, they teach post-production in movies, but also how to make video games. So that being said, what is the most creative video game that you've ever played that really just shocked you, the depth and the art, music?
There's a game called What Remains of Edith Finch, and on the surface level, it is the story of a young woman going back to her very complicated past and exploring her family bonds and trauma in a kind of messy story. But it's a really creative look through her life and the way that families interact and the way that personalities grow, and each section of it is like a different game entirely, where like you step into one room to learn about one family member and it's one crazy style of game, and then you step in the next room to uncover what happened to this family member, and it's a different crazy style of game with different styles of writing and music and voices and art. And I think it was really impactful, and I think it explored everything that a game can be, from 2D to 3D to realistic to stylized, and it used the music in similar ways just to do everything that it could. And it was only like a 5-hour game, but I think it's the most creative thing I've ever played.
How long ago did that come out?
At least 5 years ago or more.
I remember, when you were growing up, seeing you play different games. What was the one that had medieval music that I flipped out?
The Witcher.
The Witcher, yeah. I mean, I know everybody knows the TV show now, but for me, growing up, 70s and 80s, the music for video games was so awful, because it was always like a 2-bar loop that kept going around, and it would drive me insane. But when you were playing The Witcher, that was some of the coolest music I ever heard on a video game. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think we owe that in large part to just technical advancements, where they're not limited to a tiny disc anymore and they can fit in these insane things. I think one of the coolest things they do with music in games recently is, instead of making a laid out song or like an MP3, right, they make stems, and like the programmers say, okay, if something scary is happening, if something exciting, happy, sad, whatever is happening, then layer in these parts of the stems and take them out as they happen. So if you walk by some castle, it'll throw in a stem to make you feel like you're doing something wondrous, or if you're in some sad situation, it'll do that. And I think they did a lot of that in The Witcher. And
can it be spontaneous as you play, like unpredictable? Like if I walk to the left or right, different things would happen. Yeah, like the programmers can literally just say, you walk over here and this is happening, throw these stems in and make it feel this way. And it's all the same continuous track, but it's throwing in and taking out things. And I think that is something they did well in The Witcher, and they've continued to do recently because of increasing like technical capabilities. It's cool. Yeah, that's awesome. And the game you were saying before this makes me think of, we both like Kate Bush. There's an album, I think, called Never Forever, where there's a song where she keeps opening doorways and you hear different things.
Yeah.
as she goes by. So that's pretty cool. I know you and I are both into film. What's the last movie that you saw? It doesn't have to be animated, but what's the most creative movie that you've seen maybe in the last year?
I have mixed opinions about how it made me feel, but I do think Challengers was a very creative movie in terms of the soundtrack, which was incredible. It was by Trent Reznor. And I think the cinematography and the visual art and the acting and just the mix of all the things going on was just incredibly creative. And I don't know if it made me happy or sad or whatever when I left it, but I know it was really creative.
Affected you on a deep level, whatever it was.
Yeah. I don't really know how to describe it because I don't know how I feel about it at large, but I just know it was creative and it made me pause and think and say, I have to rewatch this and figure out what's going on.
I don't really remember that. Do you know who directed it?
Luca Guadagnino. I don't know if I said that right, but he also directed that very famous queer film, Call Me By Your Name.
Oh, I'll have to check that out. Okay, here's a really big question. What are your thoughts on the state of the video game industry in 2024? And I preface this by saying your plan was to go into video games, but it didn't work out. And you ended up getting an equally cool job doing something completely different.
Using the same skill set, but
are you feeling hopeful? Are you frustrated?
I don't know what I feel about it. I don't know if I think about it as much as I should. I think I am going with the flow, and I have a job, and I'm doing creative things, and I'm finding my outlets, and something else will work out after. But I did really want to work in games, and that industry really has not been doing well in the last couple of years with mass layoffs and studio closures and a lot of issues just as a result of the pandemic and economic situations in the last couple of years. So when I graduated and all my friends graduated, we couldn't find a single job, even graduating from the top college in the country for it. And it made me sad. And I enjoy my current job and I'm doing some fulfilling stuff. You know, I'm fine. I would love to go back to games someday and do what I wanted to do with that, but we'll see where life takes me.
Do you think when you go back to video games, you'll have a different perspective than you planned on when you were younger?
I think I'll be a little less serious about it. I think I've realized that I can do things in many different ways, and it doesn't have to be the rigid way I thought when I first wanted to get into games. So I think I'll take it less seriously and have more fun with it, and I think that's a good benefit. I've had a while to develop on it.
We were having a conversation earlier, and I'm just curious, if you could travel back in time to your younger self, think about when you had your first computer, what advice would you give to yourself knowing how your future would pan out? I don't know if you want to go as far as, what was that that first toy laptop you had with a frog on it? What was that?
Leapfrog?
Leapfrog, yes.
I don't think that could do anything. I think I would go back to the first maybe usable computer that I was given. I think it was the Mac you guys gave me in Ontario.
What would you tell your younger self other than don't worry, you will be able to grow a beard?
I don't think I was that worried about that. I don't know. I almost wouldn't want to tell him anything because I think that would have fucked up the process.
Yeah.
I think it's worked out pretty well so far. I think there's ways that I wish I had taken things more seriously earlier or also less seriously and kind of mixed around my priorities in terms of what mattered to me and what I should be developing more. I think there are some skills in music and in visual art that I wish I had been working on sooner instead of messing around with random filters in Photoshop. I don't think I would change that much. I think it's all led me through college into a job and to explore different things with music and recording with different people and all kinds of ways of expressing myself. And so maybe he should just keep doing it.
All right. Well, how about the flip side? Where do you see yourself in 5 years?
There's a universe where I stay at my current job and I am fine and there's no real complaints there. But there's also a world where I freak out and decide to completely throw everything away and do music or video game stuff or whatever. And I'd probably be really happy doing that if I could figure it out. I think just whatever works as long as I'm doing something creative because I think I would be miserable otherwise.
Do you think there's a possibility that someday you could make a video game that you also composed and recorded all the music like you did everything?
Yeah. I mean, 2 of my final college projects were games that I made entirely by myself and I made all the music for them. And those were short, maybe 30-minute, hour-long games that I just made for college. But I think I would love to do that on a larger scale because I've done a bit of it before.
Who, if you could pick anybody that you admire, any type of artist, like a director, an actor, a musician, someone that designs video games, who would you love to collaborate with?
There's a lot I'd love to collaborate with, but I need a couple more years to cook and develop my skills before I would allow that.
Well, throw a couple names out. Who could you see yourself being really happy collaborating with?
I feel like that's different from who I like the most, so I'm trying to separate the two. I think we've talked about her enough today, but I think Charlie CX, maybe even less so for my contributions to it, but more so just to see the process
So you would like to see the process of how she makes her music, but what if she hired you to help her make the live stage show, like with some of the computer skills that you have?
Oh, I'd have a lot of fun with that. I didn't even consider that. There's a lot more people I would expand that to in the group of artists I like in a lot of mediums if I was doing that kind of stuff. I think I was thinking more of doing what they do, but I think if it came to just injecting my visual art or whatever, or creating their vision in my visual art, definitely her doing some crazy shit for her shows.
Yeah, I think personality wise, you guys would get along and almost psychically understand each other.
I guess we'd have to see. Maybe it should be like, who the fuck is this gay dude 15 years younger than me?
All right. One thing we always do in these interviews is I'm going to give you a quote and I just want you to respond. These are all people that you know who they are, so hopefully this will spark something in your brain. 2 things to remember in life. Take care of your thoughts when you are alone and take care of your words when you are with people. Lord said that.
Sounds like something my therapist would say to me. Sounds like a pretty good way to live life. I don't know. I think protecting your relationships and nurturing them is good, and also letting out those things that maybe might damage those relationships in your personal time through art or thoughts or therapy or whatever is very healthy. So I would agree with that statement.
It kind of sounds like a be kind to others, but also be kind to yourself.
Just in different words.
Yeah. Oh, it was, she says, I was very, very lonely. When I was growing up, it was like gay means flamboyant, gay man, and lesbian means butch girl who looks masculine. There was not an array of queerness, and I was very mentally ill, suicidal for years, and not medicated, because that's just not a part of Midwest culture. It's not, maybe we should get you a psychiatrist. It's, you need God. You need to pray about that. Chappell Roan.
That's a loaded statement there.
It's an important one, though.
Well, I think to touch on the first part, I think growing up, that was something I struggled with, where, you figure out that you are gay and it's terrifying to tell people. And so you come out and you figure you have to fit what people are expecting of that. So you play into certain roles and ideas and stuff. And then you get a little older and you say, why was I doing that? I should just be doing my thing and being me. And I think especially growing up somewhere like the Midwest, you wouldn't even have the environment to explore that because it's already defined for you there and there's not a lot of openness about it. And so I was lucky to be in Los Angeles where I could meet queer people from every background where they didn't fit some predefined thing. And I realized, okay, I can just do my thing. But that is a really tough thing to think I have to fit into this and you don't. But also I think just so much of what she talks about with spaces outside of larger cities, where you don't get to explore any of that or the mental health or support around it. And there's a crushing weight of expectations or religion or just people. And I've seen it hurt a lot of people. And it's something that I'm glad that people like Chappell Roan or Billie Eilish or whoever are talking about in recent times, because I think just talking about it helps people. And I probably would have appreciated it a lot when I was a kid.
Yeah, this is making me think of something you told me a while ago. What I really love about your generation, you were telling me, and I'm paraphrasing here if I say this wrong. You told me that your generation almost thinks it's ridiculous to say that I have to be defined by I like men or I like women. And it sounds like from your last comment, same thing with religion, politics, all this stuff. Why can't we exist and grow and be who we're naturally supposed to be? Is that right?
Yeah. In like a not trying to sound cringe way, I think labels suck like that where, you feel like you have to fit into something and then at some point, I feel like a lot of people my age that I am friends with have been realizing recently that why can't I just hang out with people and do my thing? And it doesn't have to be a discussion as long as I'm not hurting anyone. Why can't I just do whatever? And I think that's an increasingly strong sentiment as we move away from a lot of traditional society behaviors. And I think that excites me. And I think there's a wave of it. I think there's been a lot of acceptance and not acceptance. And it's been a lot of discourse recently, but I hope in the end it can balance out to just let people do their thing.
And they don't have to be defined.
Yeah.
Or, for me being 54, I've noticed there's 2 types of people that I come across. And I'm not saying that either of them are wrong. There's either the people that they stay the same for their whole life. This is who I am. This is who I will always be. And that's okay. But then there's people, and I identify with this more, that just keep growing. And I think I'm an absolutely different person than when I was your age. And I think that's okay too. And that kind of goes along with what you were saying about your generation. You can just go through life, react or not react to things, and be who you are. And that may be ever evolving.
Yeah. I hope I keep changing forever. I think it would be sad if I didn't.
Yeah. Okay, the third quote that I have is, "The star has previously been open about her mental health. I go into my thoughts and feelings about my mental state and what life is supposed to be as an artist, my depression and my insecurities," she told Spin in 2019 about using her music candidly to explore her mental health and how that impacted her third album. "I'm being more honest than I've ever been before. It's been very therapeutic." Charlie XCX.
Do you know when this quote was from?
2019.
I think that's interesting in retrospective because I think she has been building up to her 2024 version of herself for a while, and it shows there because I think one of the biggest themes of her new album, Brat, that has exploded more than anything she's done before, was finally just owning that and being very candid about how she views herself and what her place is supposed to be and if she should be doing that and her mental health alongside it and what it means to do all of these things in her career. And I think that a big theme of the album was that, and a lot of the songs are about, you know, wanting this success and this fame and this art so badly, but also not knowing how to fit into it or if she's doing it right. And I think once she put that into the most plain language she has yet, people really resonated with it. And people liked seeing that instead of pop stars just being like, oh my God, everything's awesome and perfect and great. And she was really honest about it. And people were like, wow, you seem like a real human. And so I think people connected with this a lot. And despite not a traditional marketing scheme or money or anything put into it, that connection helped a lot and fostered what's blown up recently. So I think it's interesting to look back at that 2019 quote with that in mind, because I think that worked out for her and she was just starting to talk about it there.
Yeah, and what I really love about her, other than the music, because you've taught me a lot about her, is how she's been upfront about having borderline personality disorder. And I need to add to that because, you know, I've struggled with being bipolar since I was around your age. That's when I was diagnosed. And I think you know that, like, out in public, people think if you act crazy, they'll be like, what are you, bipolar? Or what are you, borderline? They kind of throw those two terms around as if they mean the same thing, and or crazy. I think we're living in a time where it is okay to be upfront and talk about it. And actually, it's very healthy. And my question to you is, a lot of people, I mean, because I'm bipolar, I know and I've read about a lot of people I admire, like Stevie Wonder, that are bipolar too. I don't think it's something that's wrong with you, because when I look at Stevie Wonder's music, he's got really sad songs, really happy songs, songs about anxiety, really deep, really shallow sometimes, goofy. I think it's just the type of people there are. I think eventually people with certain things won't be maligned because, you know, artists are extreme people and we exist to be the voice of other people that might not be able to communicate that way. What do you think about the worldview of how, you know, people look at certain mental disorders? And that's probably a bad term because I don't think it's always a disorder.
That's a lot there.
Well, it's important.
Well, I think first and foremost, I do think there's a healthy balance yet to be found in it, but I appreciate recently that people feel more okay being upfront about it. It's not like you should just use it as your entire personality or excuse, but I think being upfront and saying, hey, there's this thing in my brain and this is how I feel and this is what I might be feeling in the future is a lot nicer and more healthy than the previous don't talk about it and just wonder what the hell is wrong with that person thing.
Yeah.
Which I think is unhealthy in general. And I think that being upfront about it and pouring it into something like art or your work, whatever that may be, creates some really passionate stuff. I don't think it's a requirement to be a great artist, but I think that people with these mental illnesses, or I don't know if that's a great word to describe it, but these conditions, I think that when they find that way to take these strange things that they feel and these strong emotions and these overbearing things and they pour it into art or communication or work or whatever, I think it makes something really beautiful with a lot of depth. And I just hope more of that keeps happening. I don't know.
Well, I mean, let's go back 100 years when Oscar Wilde was alive, one of my favorite writers. He was treated terribly just because he was gay. And looking back now, it's absolutely ridiculous to think that he was thrown in jail for just being the way that he was born. And he was one of the best writers that ever lived, that his work is timeless and people still quote him and read his books and interpret it in different ways.
Yeah. And I think a lot of creativity has been stifled like that. I think very similar, like Alan Turing who is a very different kind of creative, but was gay and had channeled so much of his creative energy into solving incredible technological things, and being completely written out for that and ostracized. But 100 years later, we're still all reaping the benefits of all of his brain. And I think that a really cool thing is going forward, hoping that people do less of the hateful stuff around that and just let them do their thing. I don't know.
Well, no, there's a truth to be said of people, putting others down that are just different. That doesn't mean there's something wrong with it. And with that being said, with what we're discussing, let's say you're struggling with strong feelings, and whether you need medication or not, there's different ways to approach it. I know that there's a lot of actors that instead of therapy, they play different parts. And they're people that go to therapy, people that do both. One of the best examples, I think, is I've always been a huge David Bowie fan. And if you study his family's history, there was some mental illness. The worst example is his brother that committed suicide. But I look at David Bowie's career, and here's a guy that had strong feelings. He was very unique. He was undecided about all kinds of choices he made in his life, but I think it's fascinating that he came up with these different characters: Ziggy Stardust, Halloween Jack, the Thin White Duke. And to me, that was his therapy. He lived out everything he was struggling with. And it wasn't until, I think, the 90s that he just became David Bowie. But he had to take that long journey, made a lot of mistakes, made a lot of amazing discoveries, but I think that was a healthy journey that he took, even though there were some ups and downs.
Yeah, I think people who are carrying heavy things, when they're given a place to explore and express it, it will help them a lot and will probably help other people. So it's always good.
I always relate to his one line, I've never done good things, I've never done bad things, I never did anything out of the blue. I think that's a good place to end.
Yeah.
All right, Caleb, well, I think this went really well. I know you're about to move back east and we will miss you, but would you agree to do a part 2 someday?
Sure.
All right, Caleb Moore, thanks very much. Love you. Bye.